Hello, everyone. Welcome to this extremely brand new channel. I assure you, I am not a Fed, and this is not going to be some clickbait that's going to get you on a list, because I'm on several lists myself. But my name is Jay. For OPSEC reasons, not going to go too much into myself. Just want to quickly talk about the channel, what it's going to be, what it's about, and then go into the topic of the video itself. So this is brand new. I just started and got this email handle, all that shit, because I'm going to be starting a company very shortly. Currently, I run a nonprofit, and that takes up a lot of my time. But I've been wanting to do this for a while, and because you got to have a social media network, you got to have something. So I decided I wanted to make a YouTube channel to go with it. So keep your ears open. Shit'll come in, and I'll give updates. But now into the core concept of the video, as the title suggests, how to build a community with everyone, and yes, including the pew pew kind. So this cropped up because I was watching Grunt Proof. Randall's been doing shit for a very long time. Some great quality content. If you don't know about him, please go check him out. He had been interviewing some other military-esque, prepper-esque YouTubers, Pacific Northwest Guerrilla, and Josh from Frontiersman. Modern Frontiersman. Sorry, got to make sure I get it right so you guys can find him. Basically, what Grunt Proof has been doing is kind of asking all these YouTubers, like, how do you build a community? And even to an extent, like, how do we define what a community is first, right? So I'm looking at my experiences, and I'm gonna divulge a little bit about myself without saying too much. Basically, I've learned how to harness that ability and how to develop community through running my nonprofit, through being a professional touring musician in my early years and having to network and kind of sell myself because my music was a product, from minor leadership capability when I was in the military, because I had a unique opportunity to teach people who were in much longer than me and also who were technically more skilled than me. But just how circumstance ended up, I was the most technically proficient at something. So I've been in several roles, and also I was a teacher, a music teacher for a few years as well. So I have a lot of different experiences that all kind of channeled into what I'm doing with my nonprofit, which is geared towards, well, I shouldn't even say geared toward, it is for veterans. It started 15 years ago, recently for transitioning members, but is just taken up for all veterans who served in my county. And there is a statewide version that I don't really have a say in, but I work with my predecessor to kind of, get the whole thing going. So those are the skills and experiences that I've had that have led me to make my nonprofit more successful, and I feel will carry over into how to build a community, period. So let's get into it. The first thing when it comes to building a community is obviously identifying your demographic. English is hard. So for the purposes of the video that I've been talking about, I'm mostly going about the pew pew side of things, but you really can take this and apply it to anything. So keep that in mind as well. You may not always want to build just, tactical cool guys. Maybe you want to have something that's more smaller, local, bros to hang out with, people who can provide a service to you and you reciprocate, and you just build a network that's close, an extended family, so to speak. But obviously, I'm going to attack this more from an angle that I have personal investment in, which is the pew pew side of community things. And because YouTube's getting all, I had to catch myself from saying a slur during Pride Month. I have to be a little bit safe on how I attack this thing, especially if I'm going to be, running my own company as well. Don't want to be a target. So, getting into it. The first thing you have to acknowledge with your demographic is, what do you all share? What do you have in common? And what is your main goal? What is your main purpose? So if we're looking at the context of pew pew, we want to get some people who are all like-minded in the sense of, hey, we think that the world's probably coming to an end and we may need to defend our neighborhood. Okay. So a natural idea of that is to start with your neighborhood, right? Start with people around you. I think that's a smart idea, right? So my nonprofit is partnered with all of the park districts in my local county. My county has 11 park districts we're partnered with and about 5 or 6 other park districts with us that we're not associated with. So we have almost 20 areas, villages, however you want to look at them, all within my county. That's a pretty big neighborhood. So we got to shrink that shit down, right? Start with the people who are directly in front of you, behind you, to the sides of you. All you got to do is just wave to them from time to time, right? Basic stuff, the courtesy aspect. I'm 32, and I remember when I was in the 90s, people had to talk to each other all the fucking time. Like, you couldn't just, send a text in your group apartment Discord thing to be like, yo, can apartment above me fucking turn the volume down? Like, no, you had to actually have some confrontational skills and interact with people. It's a lost art. I know it is. Because trust me, I struggle with it too. I might even give some anecdotal stuff later on. But start with the people closest to you in terms of geography, right? Get to know them. Have a barbecue. Even if you don't have something that you can offer right off the bat, just be friendly and courteous. I cannot tell you how far courtesy, basic courtesy, will get you in today's fucking society, man. Trust me. Anything that you would want someone to do, you do for them. That's the basic concept of courtesy. Get that through your head, and networking is going to be super easy for you. So, we know that we want our neighborhood to be protected because we have families, we have friends, we have people who live near us who have skills that we are going to need if things hit the fan, or if, society just decides to go back to, summer of 2020 again. We want to make sure that we're also weeding the people who may participate in those types of things. We're keeping them out of our neighborhood. And if they are, unfortunately, in our neighborhood, we're keeping an eye on them. All right. This isn't like the whole Red Scare of the whole commie aspect thing where it's like, oh, hey, dude, turn on your neighbor in a second's notice. No, just keep eyes. Just like in the military, we have rules of engagement. We can't just immediately go and smoke people because they look like terrorists. We need to see that they are terrorists, or at the very least, they need to fucking fire at us first, right? And unfortunately, just how it is, because we're stateside, we have to wait for the people to make the first move. So we can only just keep eyes and observe. So we have people in our neighborhood. Some of them may have skills, right? If they have a skill that you don't have, when you start approaching it as like, hey man, I want to get together once or twice a month and do these little rough training drills to kind of just see how we all work together. And it could be like team building exercises. You can office corporation it up, that's what they like to do. They like to do team building exercises to really make sure that everyone knows how to fucking work together, because that's another thing that I feel a lot of people have lost skill in, is how to work together. Now, I've been in bands for a lot of my life, so I think there's an actual natural skill to working with people. On top of that, when I was in the military, I learned my fucking role for the longest time as the low man on the enlisted pole. I had to take shit. But eventually, circumstances happened where I had some leadership capabilities, and I took them. And because I had already been in bands where I was leading them, I kind of excelled. Didn't stay in that position long, but I was there, and I actually thought it was really cool to do. So when you're talking to people about these leadership things, be like, hey man, I don't really have a lot of skills, but I think what you have is super cool. Why don't we have a class on it? Why don't we get a couple of our other buddies that we've now been talking to, because we started with our local area and we started slowly branching out, right? And let's do a once a month kind of meetup community thing. And I want you to do a class on this thing, right? So, for example, my background is medical. I was a hospital corpsman in the U.S. Navy. And when I got out, I worked in various different roles in the medical field. Never above nurse, but everything below it, I basically knocked out. And I would say when it comes to emergency room style medical skills, that's probably where I excel at. And that's probably what's most applicable in a shit hit the fan type situation. So that's probably what I would give my education on, right? We would just have a bunch of people come in. I would grab some excess medical gear, maybe have a communal funds type thing. I know a lot of people who partake in these things tend to be religious. I'm not extremely religious, but I will say after a lot of healing and therapy in my life, I definitely am way more open-minded to what's above. You donate to your church, right? So your community is the thing you directly interact with. And back in the day, your church was directly involved in your community. Maybe, if you're open-minded enough to donate to your church, you should be donating to your community. And even if you don't have funds, maybe just host it. Maybe you got a really big house. It was an awesome basement. Or you're single and you don't have to worry about a wife and kids messing shit up. use what resources you have to make an offer available. You know what I mean? So everyone contributes a couple of bucks. One guy doesn't have a lot of money, but he's got a great backyard to do all this stuff in, so he hosts it. Now I'm going through, and unfortunately, I only have a limited amount of medical supplies, but through the funds that we've all put together, I can give some hands-on stuff, and people can get an idea of what they would need to do if a gunshot wound happens, or if abdominal injury happens, and we have God, I was in the medical field. You think I don't know? We have to do a needle chest comp, decomp. So it doesn't matter what you're teaching as long as you're getting people involved, because I may not be the best medical teacher. I may have been only a decent music teacher, but over time you build that confidence and that skill, right? Like, I couldn't just speak about a medical thing right now because I haven't fucking done it in like 3 years. But it's like riding a bike. Once you get back on, you kind of remember your balance. You remember where to go, what to do. And a lot of these people may not have any public speaking capabilities at all. So they're going to flub. They're going to fuck up. They're going to make themselves sound like they're idiots and don't know what they're talking about. That's just how it goes sometimes. But we're a community, all right? When you're in the military, you're going to be put in situations where you're not really going to succeed, but you have to learn to deal with it. That's an aspect we should take into building our communities. You're probably not going to be the best at what you do, and there may even be someone who's better. But you know what? That person may not have the balls to go in front and talk to other people. So when he sees some of the things that you're doing, he could pull you aside and be like, hey man, I don't mean to be that way, but actually what you were talking about there, that's kind of like an outdated thing. Or there's a better technique that we do now. Cool. Talk about it. Don't have an ego. I only know as much as I had been taught and I had done up until the last 3 years where I haven't done anything medical. So I'm sure there's something more capable, or there's someone who has more medical experience, period. I defer to them. Deferring should be a natural element in your community. If someone is more skilled and capable of what you do, they should be taking over leadership of that skill. So for example, the odd chance I ever get to talk with some of these more experienced YouTubers, like Gruntproof went overseas in active duty combat. I did not ever go overseas. I stayed stateside. So I would probably defer to him when it comes to leading combat operations, you know, because I want to live, and I would trust the guy who has the most experience to do that. You know, PNW Gorilla, he's always doing these rucks in the mountains and shit. Well, I've never been to the fucking mountains other than the Southwest, so if I don't want to get fucking lost, I'm probably going to defer to him, right? There's no ego involved. I don't want to die. I don't want to be injured. And I don't want to suffer for no reason. Just like you all probably don't want to, right? So now we've had people trading leadership roles, deferring when it comes to knowledge, and gaining all these skills because once or twice a month you're all getting together and you're just hanging out while learning something. Now, I was a bit of a hard charger during my band days. Everything we were doing was work. And the reason we did that was because we kind of rapidly outgrew our competition, and I wanted to keep that momentum. I wanted to keep getting paid for gigs. I wanted to keep getting paid higher. I wanted to be with a label. You know what I mean? So one thing I learned in hindsight was you still got to be bros with your bandmates. So some of these events don't need to be work. You don't need to be learning a new skill. You don't need to be rucking 20 miles. But always make sure that there's those goals in mind. Make sure that there's things that are being addressed. If you guys want to have a beer after you do your lessons or after you guys have done that 20-mile ruck, awesome. No problems with that. In fact, I highly encourage it. I think it's necessity for your group to develop. And if you guys want to have an extra community monthly event where you just decide to just drink, cool. Maybe that should be the time where you bring in new people. So let's talk about expansion. When a community develops, it starts with a core group. That core group shouldn't be gatekeepers, all right? You should always be interested in people who live in your area or people who have a skill that you can reciprocate with. So say you guys need a mechanic, and unfortunately you guys just don't have a mechanic that lives directly in your community. You know, maybe he lives in your adjacent community. or maybe he's even a couple of communities down. But he knows a guy because he works on your buddy's car all the time, and he's like, you know what? I'm like-minded. I like some of the stuff you guys are talking about. I want to come out to you. Well, think about this in a logistical sense, right? In an SHCF, is that guy going to be able to commute to you guys? You know, if he's only the adjacent neighborhood, you know, what, 10 miles? I can walk 10 miles in like 3.5 hours, 4 hours. So, you know, that's without, well, with a ruck, yeah, probably about 3.5, 4 hours. I also got a bad knee, so I'm probably exaggerating, but, you know. The point is that within a feasible range? Because you're going to need a mechanic. Cars are definitely going to be a luxury if society starts collapsing. Gasoline doesn't last long, so you have a finite time to do stuff. You know what I mean? So think about logistically. If he lives, for example, I live in Illinois. If he lives in the heart of downtown Chicago, but my community is out here in the Chicagoland suburbs, 40, 50 miles, and man, if he's not here at this rally point by day 3, I'm just going to write you off as a loss, bro. It is what it is. There's nothing hard against you. It's just where you feasibly live. But let's say this guy does live relatively close, but the core group members are hesitant to let outsiders in. Well, I'm going to let you in on a little secret. The whole reason why civilization society works is because a couple million years ago when we were fucking Neanderthals, we looked at this one group of people who was a little bit suspect and was just like, all right, come on in. Now, it didn't always work out. Sometimes you woke up with your head smashed in. But there's a natural, primal instinct to trust people in times of crisis. And most times, even though we are prepping for SHCF and we're always kind of worried about, you know, people down in the major cities and all that stuff, like, no, you're going to see true colors very quickly, you know, and I'm going to use anecdotal stuff here. A lot of the people that I served with had deployed over to Afghanistan. We even had a few who had been in since they invaded Iraq in, you know, 2003 and shit. They can basically vouch, you know, you're going to find very quickly who is combat capable and who isn't. And being in a post-apocalyptic civilization falls type situation, you're going to be operating in that mentality. So if your instincts are not to trust somebody and your whole group is feeling like it, you're probably right. But if there's a couple of you who are like, oh, maybe this person's okay, like, use your best judgment, right? But if we're not even in that light yet, I know a lot of people who have this mentality where it's like, no, it has to be local. It has to be Republican minded. It has to be pro-gun minded. Dude, there's different shades, man. One thing I heard Grunt Proof and all the other people talking about was like, they get some flack because there's some friends that they have who are part of these communities who may not be the most, you know, gun friendly. And that's okay. You know, rhetoric means jack shit to me. Your skill and your capability means the most to me. If you are extremely religious, but you're like super community conscious, I don't care if you're religious. All right. For a long time, that used to be a thing that I just didn't like. You know, it's like, I don't care. I don't want to hear about it. But you know what? If you're coming here all the time, you're donating, you're supporting, you're hosting, you're teaching, I'm going to get over it. If you don't like guns, okay, but you're a mechanic and you can fix cars, and you see the value in that skill, and you know that, like, okay, well, you know, because I work on cars, like, there's a potential for a crush injury. Maybe I should know how to relieve a tension pneumothorax. That's a medical skill, right? I can teach you that medical skill. If you can teach me some basic car shit, how do I change an oil filter? Like, I don't fucking know these things. You know what I mean? It doesn't have to be a barrier because you don't think like me. You don't act like me. It should be, what skills do you have? How do I reciprocate them? And why do you want to be in a community? What are you missing that you're not getting at your work, at, you know, your third place, if you guys know about that concept? So I don't care if you don't agree with me. What I care about is, can we work together? And if you can work together before things fall apart, you're probably going to be able to work together very well when things do. So don't gatekeep. And if you're the one starting these communities, you're going to be the one who becomes the problem. And I say that because one thing, when I was watching these videos and I'm thinking about my nonprofit and how these skills kind of relate, is unfortunately some of the other nonprofits that have my program that I don't have direct input on, they set unrealistic standards for where they're at. And I have to be careful. I can't say, lower the standard and all that shit. But no, they have requirements that just aren't feasible because they don't have a huge veteran population by them. And then these people come out and they have limited areas where they can go and participate. And that's just not beneficial. You're making it to the point where me as a veteran, before I even started running this program, I'd be like, no, go fuck yourself. I'm not going to go only on Tuesdays between 3 and 5 to go get this benefit when there's a place 20 miles away that lets me do it during the week whenever I want. You know what I mean? So you have to be very open-minded to what you offer. So we covered a baseline of how to do it, your core demographic and what skills are needed for your community. Starting in the most localized area possible, front, back, side to side, expanding slowly outward. Making sure everyone shares leadership responsibilities. Deferment. I like that word in case you hadn't realized. Defer to those who have more skill than you. Leave ego out of it. You're all training, working together to be better. And finally, a standardized operating procedure. SOPs. What are you guys going to do during these hypothetical situations? Do you set hypothetical situations? That's another thing. Sometimes, and I've actually experienced this, people get together and they do all these things, and then there's not even okay, so is this what we do when zombies come up? Is this what we do when the alien invasion comes up? No? Oh, okay. All right. So this was just kind of like a whole day exercise of nothing. I really do feel to help keep people motivated and to also make sure you actually really are on the same wavelength, set an operating procedure for each thing that you do. One thing people don't want to talk about, and I'll drop as a hint, is going to be more of the content that I focus on in the future because it dictates some of the stuff that the products I'd be putting out with my company. There's going to be Minutemen, but there's also going to be what I'm going to call DA men, direct action. Those people are kind of going to be like the French liberation guys in the 40s during Nazi-occupied France. They're going to be doing some work and then getting into the shadows. And you're going to need some very clandestine gear. So yeah, just like I said, a little tip for some of the things that I'm going to be putting out with my company. So if you're part of a Minuteman, you're obviously going to need your own operating procedure of where to patrol, setting your areas of conflict, and how to deconflict from those things. When you're a DA guy, that shit is not overlapped at all. You are going to need to prep so much. Trench Grenade's a really good guy who kind of tells you how to do that stuff. I highly recommend his channel as well. There are very few people I see who have the balls to talk about that shit, but also actually have the skill set to talk about it as well. But again, going back to it, having a standard operating procedure. What are you going to do in X scenario, Y scenario, Z scenario? And if you think it's a little unnecessary to go through the alphabet like that, I highly recommend one of the people who starts your core community be an active duty combat vet. Because let me fucking tell you, dude, there's a reason you are training for years before you go over and deploy. Because the second you go there and you get into a gunfight, it's like Mike Tyson said, everyone's got a plan until they get punched in the fucking face. When a bullet zips past you, you're not fucking thinking about what you're doing anymore. You're relying on instinct. And if you haven't been training and developing that fucking instinct, you have none. You freeze up, you get shot, you fucking die. We don't want that. But part of that is, do we have a rally point? Do I know where to go if we're taking too much fucking fire? If you don't think about those things beforehand, you will not think about them as it's happening. So having a couple of different scenarios and operating procedures for them, it's going to keep your group tighter in the sense of community and in the sense of skill capability. So do it. I think these are some good baseline ideas on how to do it. I'll release another video talking about how to bring it up to people and kind of your intuition. Who do you think are the people to bring it up to? So stay tuned and we'll get things going.